Standing up for families throughout Nevada, telling the stories of working women and men. This is our voice and our community. We are Nevada with your hosts, Leonard Cardinale and Nick DiArcangelo.
Come on, rise up. Come on, rise up. Come on, rise up. Come on, rise up. Come on, rise up.
You are listening to We Are Nevada every Friday at 9 a.m. We are the new voice for public employees, working families, retirees, proud union workers, and everyone in Nevada here on KLAV 1230 AM radio or streaming live on the internet at www.klav1230am.com. Good morning. This morning we have a great show for you. We're heading up north. We're going to be speaking again to a labor and delivery nurse about the state of healthcare in Nevada. She works at one of the most profitable hospitals in the nation, and it's one of the most profitable in the state. She's going to give us an idea of what her day-to-day is like in Nevada's hospitals for both nursing and the support staff. Then we're going to be talking about issues about staffing, burnout, and safety in our hospitals, issues that are important to every Nevadan.
Yeah, great show planned today. Lots of good information going out on a number of subjects. Later on, you and I will be talking about collective bargaining. We received a lot of requests from our members to provide some background about collective bargaining, and they've asked us to talk about what the process really means to public employees and to the future of Nevada.
All right, well, you're listening to We Are Nevada. I am your host, Nick DiArcangelo, and joining me is my co-host, Leonard Cardinale. Good morning.
Good morning, and let's get ready to roll.
All right, we have something a little special on the show today. You know how much I love to introduce labor music and working man music into our show, Leonard.
Yes, that's your thing.
Well, it's not just my thing. I think it's important that not only do we give a little bit of a history of what that labor movement and that type of thing, but also, you know, there's a really rich music history as well. And I came across this great book by Pete Seeger called Carry It On. It's titled A History in Song and Picture of the Working Men and Women of America. And I was actually really lucky. I bought it from one of those online sites. I bought it used. And when I got it in the mail, I opened it up, and in the front cover, it's signed by Pete Seeger, and there's a little drawing of a banjo. So I feel very, very fortunate to receive this. The song we're about to hear, words by John Barnes and music by Grant Rogers, is called When a Fellow is Out of a Job. And the selection out of this book, it talks about that period in history when unions were concentrating on what they call pork chop issues, cost of living, wage increases, and job security. But at that time, the economy and industry hit the skids. This was about 1949. Millions of people were out of the streets. And there's a quote in here from an unemployed woman that's featured in the book called Working, where she says, "Being part of something, making something happen was important. That's a difference between being alive and being dead. Now I'm not making anything happen." And
Great quote.
Yeah, this is one of these types of songs. We had one a couple of weeks ago about the effects of the economy, not just on the great economic engine, but on people and their sense of self-worth. So let's take a listen to this. This is called When a Fellow is Out of a Job.
All nature is sick from her heels to her hair when a fellow is out of a job. She's all out of kilter, beyond all repair, when a fellow is out of a job. There's no juice in the earth, no salt in the sea, no ginger in life in this land of the free. And the universe ain't what it's cracked up to be when a fellow is out of a job. What's the good of blue skies and blossoming trees when a fellow is out of a job? And your kids have big patches all over their knees when a fellow is out of a job. There's no juice in the earth, no salt in the sea, no ginger in life in this land of the free. And the universe ain't what it's cracked up to be when a fellow is out of a job. Those patches you see look as big as the sky when a fellow is out of a job. They blot out the landscape and cover your eyes when a fellow is out of a job. There's no juice in the earth, no salt in the sea, no ginger in life in this land of the free. And the universe ain't what it's cracked up to be when a fellow is out of a job. Every man that's a man wants to help push the world, but he can't if he's out of a job. He's left out behind on the shelf, he is curled when a fellow is out of a job. There's no juice in the earth, no salt in the sea, no ginger in life in this land of the free. And the universe ain't what it's cracked up to be when a fellow is out of a job. He feels he's no part in the whole of the plan, an obsolete cog, just a worn-out old man. And the world is not what he's had it to plan when a fellow is out of a job. There's no juice in the earth, no salt in the sea, no ginger in life in this land of the free. And the universe ain't what it's cracked up to be when a fellow is out of a job.
Nick, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to talk about an article that I read. It's called The Assault on Public Sector Collective Bargaining, Real Harms and Imaginary Benefits by Joseph E. Slater. And this is what he writes. Perhaps the most striking political development in 2011 is a widespread and aggressive assault on public sector collective bargaining rights. While the most highly publicized and most significant changes have taken place in Wisconsin and Ohio, moves are afoot in a number of states. These changes represent the most radical revisions in labor law in the U.S. in decades, and they have set off a political firestorm. This brief will argue that these attacks are deeply misguided. They serve no purpose beyond a partisan attempt to weaken a key supporter of the Democratic Party, and they do not address budget deficits. Instead, they take away a core right that has been recognized in the vast majority of the United States for up to half a century, a right that is considered fundamental in much of the industrialized world, a right that helps individual teachers, firefighters, police officers, and other public employees in their day-to-day lives at the workplace, a right that helps sustain a vital middle class, and a right that helps ensure talented and skilled people will find public service an attractive career option. This issue brief will provide background on the development and functioning of public sector labor laws in the U.S., discuss the current political debates over such laws, including debates over whether public sector workers are overpaid, explain some of the most prominent recent legislation in this area, including but not limited to laws in Ohio and Wisconsin, and critique the proposed changes. Let me just brief you on the first section. History and background of public sector unions and public sector labor law. Historical underpinnings. Public sector labor law in the U.S. developed on a somewhat different track than private sector law. The National Labor Relations Act of 1935 gave private sector workers across the country the right to bargain collectively, but the NLRA excludes public sector workers. This was likely in large part due to constitutional concerns. For instance, back then it appeared unclear whether Congress had the power under the Commerce Clause to pass the NLRA itself, and contemporary 10th Amendment doctrine would have been a huge challenge to applying a national labor law to the states. Also, fear of strikes by public workers inhibited development of public sector labor law. The U.S. was unusual in this regard. Notably, in other Western democracies, public sector workers and their unions have long had mostly the same rights as public sector workers. Despite having no legal rights to bargain collectively before the 1960s, public sector unions organized and represented their members in a variety of ways. Unions of postal workers formed in the late 19th century. Some public sector unions that are prominent today, such as the American Federation of Teachers and the International Association of Firefighters, formed in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. AFSCME formed in the 1930s. Interestingly, the Building Service Employees Union, the BSEU, which today is the SEIU, has represented many public sector employees since as far back as the 1920s and the 1930s. So, Nick, let's talk about PERS for a minute. I was reading an article in the RJ that was put out by the Associated Press by Christopher Wills. And in that article, he's talking about PERS from the perspective of the Pew Research Institute in Washington, D.C. As you know, Pew claims they are a nonpartisan group that does only research. However, they seem to be leaning to the right quite a bit. In one of the parts of the article, it reads, although Nevada is not on the list of the 10 states with the worst funding level, Dana Bilyeu, executive officer of the Public Employees Retirement System, does not think the Pew report is fair to Nevada, in part because how pensions are funded differs widely among states. Quote, employees in Nevada pay half of the costs of benefits, she said. I keep pointing that out to Pew. They are trying to put all states into a model to make an apples-to-apples comparison when you can't make that comparison, end quote. She said PERS intends to have funds to pay all of its long-term liabilities. It operates under a plan that requires employees and their government employers to pay a higher amount into their fund every 2 years. The legislature has been authorizing these increases. Quote, Pew is trying to do a good job of giving people information, but there are so many differences between the states, Bilyeu said. We are a strong, solid performer in the long haul. And what's interesting about that is that last year, I believe the PERS increase, I know because our group paid it, was about 2.7%. And there was also an increase the year before.
So, Leonard, let me jump in and bring us to more recent history, and more recent is 1970. And 1969, 1970 in this state, I had read a paper recently about arbitration and about collective bargaining in this state. And one of the things that struck me was the work that the teachers did, both in Washoe and Clark County. They had a strike, and this is really what brought collective bargaining and bargaining arbitration to Nevada. So basically what happened was there was this concern about public employees striking and closing local governments down, closing down communities. And so this is how collective bargaining was born. And then amendments were made in 1970 and I think 71, which brought in binding arbitration, because there was a system where now we had collective bargaining, but nothing was really getting done, and decisions couldn't get made, and people weren't agreeing on things, and so there was a need. They discovered that there was a need for a third party now to make these rulings and to say, okay, well, this is what you need to do, or this is what you need to do. And this, it's an interesting paper because it talks about the early days of collective bargaining in the state, and these are things that, and I'm glad you brought this paper in, and we're talking about this because we're at a time now where people have obviously either forgot or are ignoring history, and they're saying, well, we need to take away some collective bargaining rights, and they're looking at doing things that are regressive, right? So so one of the options are, look, someone says, well, public employees, they shouldn't be able to have collective bargaining, or they shouldn't have binding arbitration, things like that. Okay, well, let's take a look at what happened before this existed. When things didn't go, when things were bad.
Well, what happened before this existed is you were allowed to strike.
Yeah, right.
And
there's the option.
Right.
So the option is option A, collective bargaining, which has worked for 40 years. Option B.
Remember in the 1960s when the railway workers decided to strike, and at the time the president decided that was going to affect the mail delivery, and I believe they even had the military get involved and go down there and try to stop them from striking. And obviously in the day and age that we live in, we gave up the ability to strike for collective bargaining. And I was watching, I believe it was Channel 8 political show the other night, and they had Senator Mike Roberson on, and he said that he's committed to making some changes to collective bargaining during this next session, and even mentioned North Las Vegas and the natural disaster clause that they're trying to use in order to suspend the contracts.
Well, and I think the Public Employee Coalition, one of the things that you'll hear from any one of the members of the Public Employee Coalition, We Are Nevada, is that we are committed to making improvements to collective bargaining as well.
I think we could make some positive improvements. Sure. And the interviewer, when he was talking to the senator, his opinion was, he said something to the effect where he thought that ability to pay should be removed from the criteria in collective bargaining,
well, ability
binding
to pay,
arbitration.
Look, in that section of NRS, I think it's NRS 200, right? It's where it talks about. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about fact finding, because in fact finding, one of the key things they look at is ability to pay. So if the two parties can't come to a resolution and they send it to a fact finder, the first thing they look at is the ability to pay. Once they've determined that there is an ability to pay, then they look at what other government agencies are doing, both in state and out of state. So, but there's something very specific about ability to pay, and they've made it kind of narrow, and they made it very specific. They look at ability to pay, but they do not consider money that's going towards that's already dedicated to a certain project, or they do not consider future money. So, so to throw out, I don't think they should consider ability to pay any longer. Look, it's been refined, and it's already a great system now where they look at it in the strictest sense. So, the reason why I mention this is because when they look at ability to pay, they're not looking at the money that is dedicated to things such as, let's say it's a transit
Capital
company.
improvement project.
Well,
for
exactly.
instance.
Let's say it's a transit company, and they have a certain amount of money that's dedicated towards fleet maintenance and renewal of that fleet. That money would not come into play. And let's say that money comes from the federal government from a grant like ARA or Tiger. These are things that you may see on the signs around town.
That is restricted money.
Right,
I would
that's
agree.
restricted
I would
money.
agree.
Exactly. So they're not considering that money. They're talking about the funds that come in to pay the salaries. Now, we just had a situation where we had the finance director for the transit agency. When he was questioned by the Board of Commissioners, they said, we are concerned about the money, the tax money that's coming in, and of course it going to the salaries and paying these people a decent wage. And he said that the amount of money that goes to wages is minuscule compared to the amount of money that's coming in. These are his words. This is what he said before the Board of Commissioners, which you can watch on their website. So, this is a fair process, and when they talk about ability to pay, this is a good benchmark to be able to figure out how to solve these disputes.
Well, one of the issues that I've brought up on multiple occasions is there's a difference between money that is earmarked or money that is dedicated. However, that money is still considered unrestricted by common accounting practices and by law. So, in other words, if you have capital improvement project money that's matched by federal funding, I think it's fairly obvious that money is restricted and must be used in that manner. However, there's additional money to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars that is earmarked for projects or has been carved out, but it's not restricted as far as being able to pay employees pay and benefits. And that's where the whole argument of ability to pay, because one of the reasons I believe that the conservative people want to remove that from the binding arbitration is because if you have to back up in the process is the local government entity comes to you and says, hey, we have a budget shortfall, we're going to be short on money, and we're going to need some concessions. So then, the associations say, okay, well, we'll talk to our people, and we're certainly willing to work out some details and contribute to rebuilding the financial structure of the local government entity. And then at some point, the associations will say, can you show us the numbers? Mm-hmm. And you'll get some basic numbers, and you'll get CAFRs and some accounting numbers, and they'll show you money in and money out. But when it starts to get to specifics, that's where it starts to fall apart.
Right.
And what we found with the teachers is the teachers went to binding arbitration over a 2% raise, while the arbitrator found that the local government entity was not able to prove inability to pay.
Right.
So they sided with the teachers and decided to give them a 2% raise, even though there's a lot of financial difficulties out there at this time. And I think what some entities would like to do is remove that from binding arbitration, so they can ask you for money or concessions, or they can put pressure on employees to give back pay and benefits without having to prove that they actually need them.
Yeah, well, this is the ultimate transparency, right? Because now this third party is saying, well, we need to see the books. We need to open this up. We want to see what's going on. And this is good for taxpayers. This is good for everybody. Obviously, they're fighting it, so it's not good for someone. But I think that this is a situation that is good for everybody. I was in another Board of Commissioner meeting, and I was sitting there, and I saw talking about dedicated money. That there was the county was going through their finances, and they were talking about this money that was dedicated for this and that, like you said, capital improvement projects. But it turned out they were looking for an approval to shift $2 million and from a dedicated project to the general fund. And the question came up saying, well, wait a second, the commissioners didn't want to approve that because they thought they were on shaky legal ground. Well, it turned out that this was money that was set up from an old fund, and that money was dedicated, but the interest from that money, the $2 million interest, imagine how big this pot must have been and how long it must have been sitting there for to have $2 million worth of interest. The interest for that money is not committed, and the interest of that money was able to be moved over to the general fund. So things like requiring an ability to pay and looking over these books, this isn't something that's just good for public employees. This is good for taxpayers. This is good for everybody. This type of transparency is important, and any type of movement to try and restrict that I think isn't good.
Well, let me mention that the Nevada Freedom of Information Act specifically points out NRSs that govern local government entities and the state, the counties, the cities, and fundamentally, those laws were created to make sure that the books are open to the public, that the books are open. Those are elected people. This is not a private business. And a lot of times they use private business practices to run a city or to run a county, which I don't totally disagree with, because there are some principles for large-scale businesses that do apply. However, in some cases, they treat their city or their county like a for-profit type of business, and that's where it falls apart, because keep in mind they're elected to run a city, and in order to run a city you have to have public employees. Right. And whenever you have a greater amount of public employees than you do, let's say, in these days and times, you can see that the economy flourishes, because when you pay public employees a decent wage for their work, they spend their money, and their money becomes everyone else's money.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then I think it's funny when you're talking about the books are open and freedom of information. Look, we know the books are open. The books are there. The public agency that I used to work for before I came to SEIU, they printed their financials and they left them at the front desk. They're required by law, right? I'm not talking about that type of thing. I'd like to see a group of UNLV students who are accountants or sit down and go through this stuff. I used to throw out the term forensic accounting, and one of your colleagues pointed out to me that technically the term forensic accounting implies that there's something illegal going on, right? And the way I was using it was a real stringent type of investigation into why is this happening and what is this happening here and how is this happening. I'd like to see that type of deep delving into the book. So we get reports every once in a while. I had a report that came out from the Clark County managers that talked about compensation reports, and it's something that we had never seen before. And it talked about average salaries and longevity and when people were getting longevity. And this information was extremely valuable to us, and it really painted a picture that was very different from what you're hearing both in the media and also reported from some of these groups, these different groups, and I think that I think there's a lot of treasures out there that need to be looked at and can be looked at, and that's what I like to see. Not just when we have the open books already, but we need the minds that can dig into the stuff and take a look at it and say, and ask the right questions. That is that's the key right there.
Well,
right?
let's call collective bargaining what it is. It's the right to disagree with your employer.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what rubs a lot of people the wrong way. You have a right in your pay to negotiate your pay and benefits. You have a right to a grievance process. And, as we argued in the last legislative session, binding arbitration statistically doesn't benefit either side. In other words, management or labor has not significantly benefited from the existence of binding arbitration. About half the time they win, about half the time we win. And what's interesting is we did a lot of research with other police agencies and some of the local government agencies that have public employees, and what we found is that there are very few cases, in fact it's rare, that the arbitration process goes all the way through during a contract negotiation.
Right.
And when it does, it usually doesn't benefit one side or the other. So you would say, well then, why are they trying to go after collective bargaining to save money when it doesn't save money? It's about your rights as an employee.
Right, and also, here's another big thing about this that we have to talk about, and that is the fact that there's a confusion about the cost to arbitration and fact-finding, and there's a confusion about the cost of grievances and that type of arbitration. There are two completely different types of arbitration, right? There's what we're talking about generally here about contracts and the whole contract process. The two parties agree to bargain a contract. They go into the bargaining process. If they don't come to an agreement on their own, they can request a mediator. They go through the mediation process. If for some reason that they still can't reach an agreement, then they go to either arbitration or fact-finding. And this is all about negotiating that contract. It's a contract deal. Negotiating the two sides coming together to negotiate that contract. Now, there's a second part to arbitration where you have the contracts in place already, and then you have management violating the contract in some way, and then someone, the union, a union officer, a steward, or someone that works in that shop files a grievance, and then that can go to arbitration too. These are two completely different scenarios, and as you mentioned, when it comes to contracts and arbitration, and even in fact finding, in our case, in our experience, it hasn't turned out too well, as far as on the employee side and the contract side.
Right. So if it benefits management as much or more,
Right.
than it does the employees. Why do they want to get rid of it so bad?
Well, the good news is, which we say every single time we wrap up a contract, and we get ratification vote, and then it goes to Board of Commissioners, whoever it goes to. The good news is that more cases than not, the collective bargaining process works, and both sides are able to come to the table and come to an agreement. And then in almost every case that I've seen, except for very recently, it is passed by a Board of Commissioners, the electeds, who look at it and say, okay, management, and we know that there was a certain amount of give and take. We know that both sides didn't get exactly what they want. It's obvious here that there was a lot of hard work done, and both sides bargained in good faith, and they've come to a good agreement, and they vote on it, and it goes through. So yeah, this is a process that has worked now for 40 years. It has been refined, as I mentioned at the beginning of this. They've made some adjustments. I don't know if you know this, but in the early 70s, it was the governor himself who made the decision on binding arbitration.
I did know that.
Both parties. You did know that.
I did.
Oh, how about that?
I read that in an article. I read that in that same article.
Probably an article I gave you. No, they actually went up to Carson. I mean, sometimes it was the governor, sometimes it was a representative of his. But yeah, they brought it up to the. Do you remember the governor's name? That when all this was, there's a bridge named after him.
It's right on the tip of my tongue,
the
but I
tone.
cannot remember. Well, let me go back a little bit further in history.
Sure.
Because collective bargaining gained support in the 20s and 30s and going into the 40s because the core value was representation. And when you look at collective bargaining and the formation of it and how it came about, there were large corporations that were growing quickly, and the employees wanted some representation. Well, for many, many years, it was really up to the corporation, to the big business.
Right.
They would appoint someone that they felt was in a management position that would represent the employees, speak with the employees, and then come back to management with different options. And the employees really didn't like that. What they wanted was they wanted someone to represent them that represented their voice.
Right. So
So they created this process where they can form their own association, and that association then can elect who they want to be their voice. And obviously, the person they chose in general to represent them and be their voice was not always the management favorite. No surprise there.
Mm-hmm.
But that is really the representation is really the basis for collective bargaining, so that the employees feel that someone is standing up for them, providing their voice to management, and not just someone that management would choose to represent those same employees.
all right, I'm just going to tell you because I know the people out there are dying to know, or most people probably know it. Michael Callahan. Governor Michael Callahan.
Correct, yes, yes.
Governor Michael Callahan, it's important to note that he was a teacher. Right? He was a teacher, and so he understood these issues. And again, it's a connection I like to draw about the past and what happened back then and the whole issues, because now we see 40 years later, we have our one of our coalition partners with this education initiative that is important not just for education and bringing it to adequate funding, but also it helps public employees and it helps the taxpayers, because we have a system where there are games played up there in Carson. We saw it last time, where
We
people
did.
say things like leverage and and all other types of things where that shouldn't be happening. And now here, we have a group of people that have come together now and said, okay, yeah, we see the problem, we hear what's going on, we saw what happened, and we have a solution that makes sense and it's going to work, and it's also a good way to move forward.
Well, look, at the end of the day, as I mentioned that Joseph Slater brief just a few minutes ago, this is really an attack on the middle class.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is an attack on the middle class worker and the fact that they have contractual rights. And there's a lot of management people out there that just refuse to accept the fact that workers have rights and will do everything in their power to try to circumvent those rights. But I think eventually that kind of philosophy and mentality will get those same people in some pretty difficult situations legally.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is an attack on the middle class, and I think that there are some people who, philosophically, at their core beliefs, they really believe in what they're doing when they're attacking the middle class. But I think that also there are some wannabes who see what's going on, the trend with some of these politicians and all the attention they're getting. A lot in some of these cases, just people that want attention. Some
Well,
people
let's
want
face it, they like
the
the power.
shortcut. Well, yeah,
They like to abuse the power, yeah,
Some
for sure.
people want the shortcut to give themselves a national name and say, "Oh, look what I'm doing in Nevada," and hopefully ride that to a career nationally or something like that. Well, look, it's not going to work.
That remains to be seen.
Well, it's not going to work because the working people are not. They're not. I'm going to be very diplomatic and G-rated friendly on the radio. They're not pleased with what's going on.
No, they're not.
You know?
And when
this coalition is a great example of what happens when people are used or leveraged or told we're going to take away these rights that you've had for 40 years. We're going to take away your voice, right? Because that's what they're saying, just based on what you said. Look, we're looking to take away your voice. Well, no, that's not going to happen because we're going to be unified, and we're going to have a show every Friday on 9 a.m. called We're Nevada, which is your voice.
Oh, good little
plug, man.
good little segue. So, yeah, for the listeners, we will be talking quite a bit more about collective bargaining, especially as we approach the next legislative session, because there are conservatists out there who have made it known and made no secret that they're going to attack.
I call them regressives.
Regressives instead of progressives.
Well, yeah. Actually, Robert Reich calls them regressives. I call them regressives. They're looking to do some bad stuff.
Okay, we'll pick up collective bargaining on a future show.
All right. At the Minnesota State AFL-CIO Convention, Hubert Humphrey, the 38th Vice President of the United States, said, "The story of the labor movement needs to be taught in every school in this land. America is a living testimonial to what free men and women, organized in free democratic trade unions, can do to make a better life. We ought to be proud of it." This week in labor history, August 10, 1931, the Airline Pilots Association was founded in Chicago, winning its first contract in 1939, signing a deal with American Airlines. August 9, 1998, 73,000 telephone workers in 13 states began a strike against Bell Atlantic, based in New York City. 2 days later, the Communications Workers of America would reach an agreement with Bell Atlantic. The union called it a landmark settlement that would give telecom workers greater access in areas such as internet services and other emerging data technologies of the time. August 7, 1894, Eugene Debs and 3 other union leaders were arrested following the Pullman strike, which had come to be known as the Debs Rebellion. At one point of the strike, a New York Times editorial called Debs a lawbreaker at large and an enemy of the human race. Eugene Debs was instrumental in founding the American Railway Union, the nation's first industrial union. The strike grew out of a compensation dispute started by the workers who constructed the train cars made by the Pullman Palace Car Company. The Pullman Company cut the wages of its employees by 28%. The membership of the American Railway Union refused to handle Pullman cars or any other railroad cars attached to them, including cars containing U.S. mail. The strike extended to St. Louis, doubling its size to 80,000 workers. The U.S. federal government intervened, obtaining an injunction against the strike on the theory that the strikers had obstructed the U.S. mail carried on Pullman cars. President Grover Cleveland sent the United States Army to enforce the injunction. The entrance of the Army was enough to break the strike. 13 strikers were killed, and thousands were blacklisted. An estimated $80 million worth of property was damaged, and Debs was found guilty of contempt of court for violating the injunction and sent to federal prison. August 4, 1997. A successful 15-day strike was launched by 180,000 workers against the United Parcel Service over excessive reliance on part-time workers. It was the largest U.S. strike in 20 years. The most important single factor distinguishing the UPS strike from most of its predecessors of the last 15 years, and one of the most important reasons why it succeeded, was that it was an offensive strike, not a defensive one. It was a struggle in which the union was prepared, fought over issues which it defined, and one which relied overwhelmingly on the efforts of the members themselves. This is our labor history for the week ending Friday, August 10. All right, Ashley Osborne is with us. She's a labor and delivery nurse in Elko, Nevada. She's a member of SEIU. The SEIU has been bargaining a contract with the support staff at Northeastern Nevada Regional Hospital for more than 5 months. And welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and I just wanted to let me just ask you right off the bat here, how long you've been a labor and delivery nurse?
I've been working in the labor and delivery department for approximately 14 years.
And oh wow, 14 years.
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of babies.
Yes.
Yes,
I have.
Tell me about the job a little bit.
Well, we in this facility we do labor and delivery, which entails getting the patient ready for delivery, and then nursery, and which entails taking care of the babies and educating the parents on what to do when they take the babies home, and that's the big part of our job is education.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, yeah.
Well,
and then we also take care of the moms after they deliver as well.
Ashley, LifePoint is a corporation that owns Northeastern Nevada Regional Hospital. They have 75 beds. and they make up 22% of the corporation's total profit. They have 1.5% of the beds of the entire corporation nationwide. Let me ask you, what changes have you seen in your occupation since you become a nurse?
Is consisted of a lot of ancillary staff as well as the RNs, and it was called group nursing, which we worked together as a team to provide good care to the patient and safe care to the patient. Now it's very rare that you will have a CNA, to your patients. So that has changed a lot in the fact that we've been having to do more jobs and not focus on our patients as much as we used to. There has been. Now, are you asking me in relation to this facility or all my other hospitals I've worked at before?
Well, no. I mean, I'm one thing that I think a lot of people aren't really familiar. I mean, they know when you think about a hospital, you think of doctors, you think of nurses, and and then there's that whole category of what we call ancillary staff or support staff. But it takes a lot of really dedicated people to help people. And I was just wondering, just give us an idea of what types of job do the ancillary staff do?
Oh boy, they are the hidden power force behind every hospital. I mean, as well as the nurses, but the ancillary staff you hardly see other than when there's a spill somewhere, they're there mopping it up, as in environmental workers. You've got the kitchen supplying the whole hospital with proper nutrition. You've got your admitting clerks. You've got your respiratory techs. You've got your lab techs. You've got all kinds of techs behind all the doors, and we couldn't provide any type of care without these ancillary staff members, and they go very unnoticed, in my opinion.
Ashley, I remember last legislative session there were some bill drafts submitted that had to do with the labor and delivery nurse ratio to newborns. Is that something that you have been taking a look at in your particular hospital situation, and do you feel it's adequate these days?
I do not in any way feel it's adequate. I'm very passionate about the safe staffing in labor and delivery at this point. There is an organization called AWON. They do have standards for safe staffing for a labor and delivery nurse and for a nurse-free nurse per baby, depending on the acuity of that baby or that labor patient. This hospital, I posted it, and they chose not to go by it. So, yeah, it's a hard fight. I mean, there are hospitals nationwide abiding by the AWON standards, and that's the classes. The AWON organization is what we learn from. That's who the hospital sends us to get certified in these types of areas that we have to learn.
Well, I'm sure that that's an issue that's going to come up again in the legislature starting here in 2013. And for the people that are listening who don't really exactly know what we're talking about, can you give us an idea of what a very safe, very high level of healthcare situation might be as far as ratios?
Do you want me to give you an unsafe or safe ratio?
Safe would be fine.
Okay. So we would have 2 nurses, one nurse to one Pitocin patient, meaning they come in, they're being induced in labor by an IV therapy called Pitocin. And when they are being induced, we have to control that very closely, and the nurse needs to be one-on-one with that patient. Or if the patient comes in and has high blood pressure and is put on a medication called magnesium sulfate, and we have to monitor their intake and output very closely, as well as the medication, that is also a one-on-one. At this point, that's not happening. I've been charge nurse here while I have been training a new nurse, new grad, and I have had 2 patients on Pitocin at this facility.
Wow. That's unbelievable. One of the things that Leonard mentioned at a couple minutes ago was he was talking about this hospital up in Elko, and he kind of went through some statistics. They have 75 beds, but I think that one of the things that's really striking to me is that the
the total number of beds that they have only makes up 1.5% of the entire corporation nationwide, right? And then and yet this is an amazingly profitable hospital. I mean, let's let everybody, everybody needs to know that this is a for-profit hospital, and as small as this hospital it is, their profits make up 22% of the corporation's total profit. So there's money with this hospital. They have it to spend it and dedicate the resources that they need to make sure that the community is getting the health care that it deserves. Now, tell me about this community. Who does it serve? Who's the customer for NNRH?
I love this community. This is my hometown. This community started out as a ranching town, and it has quickly become a gold mining town. And as you all know, gold is at its all-time high.
It's worth its weight in gold.
Yes.
Wow.
And so, therefore, we have people in this community willing to pay at this point in our economy for a 4-bedroom house. Our houses here are still $280,000, whereas anywhere else in Nevada, that's not the case.
Yeah, you don't have to remind me, Ashley. Thanks.
Ashley, I have a question. As far as I know that negotiations are going very slowly, which is kind of a surprise to me, given the level of care and the level of service that the workers provide. What would you say the turnover rate is like? In other words, obviously you have people come in, they have to learn the ropes, and everyone has their own procedures. And is the turnover rate high, and is that affecting production?
Let me give you an idea of what the turnover rate is here. I have educated probably about 12 nurses in the labor and delivery department in the last 7 years, and 2 are left working at this facility in labor and delivery.
Interesting.
Wow.
And as far as patient care, you have to ask yourself, how many of these people are always learning? And when someone comes in a year later to have their baby, in a small community like Elko, it always helps to have a familiar face. And it's rough, because I know a lot of the community members here in Elko. It's a wonderful community, but it helps with the continuation of care for our patients to have the same faces around and let them know that our hospital supports us in patient care and the continuity of care.
Well, and let's talk a little bit more about negotiations. I just came on board with SEIU when you were bargaining your last contract, and I remember.
Oh boy!
Yeah, yeah, that was my baptism by fire. And I remember one of the issues was, it just stunned me, where there was an issue of safety in the hospital. Now, you would think that when you're in a hospital and you're vulnerable for whatever reason, whether you're a newborn or you're there because you are sick, that you can at least expect that you're safe. And it was surprising to me. One of the issues was safety. The fact that there were sometimes violent patients, and they were a danger to both staff, both yourself, and also to maybe other patients that were there. So tell me a little bit about that. And then the big question is that still an issue today?
Oh, well, in the past, and currently in the hospital settings around the nation, as you probably know, the violence has increased due to our economy, and we have a lot of, unfortunately, violent people off and on. And in the past, we were expected to group up together and handle it on our own.
Wait a second. I got to interrupt you there, because this was something that I heard, a year ago, maybe it was 2 years ago. The notion of that you have to group up together. So, what is it? I know what it means.
No training.
No. So you have a person who's violent, and now tell me how you're handling that person.
Okay, I've had this happen to me. I have had to call my house supervisor. There is a code that we call overhead, but when you're working a night shift, it's very minimal as to how much help that you would get in the past. And I personally had to confront this patient, talk him down, escort him out with my supervisor, and call him a cab and send him on his way before the police department could get here, because unfortunately they're busy off handling city police department issues.
Right, and so we just had a situation here in Las Vegas. There was a stabbing at a restaurant, nearby restaurant, and it may or may not have been gang related. But all I know is that the report in the paper said that the gang ended up at UMC Hospital, but they were rebuffed by security, by UMC security, And now one of the
Yes.
things that I remember up in Elko is that security was a telephone call to the police department. I remember even the chief of, I believe it was the chief of police, wrote a letter in support of you saying that this is a condition that's dangerous.
Yes, the sheriff, the
Sure.
county sheriff did, and then also the city police chief did support us. But the sheriff did write us a letter of support in the fact that we do need a safe place to work here, and he did agree it was not safe without security. Currently, the hospital has hired a contract security company to give security during the night shift. During the day, it's the guys that change our light bulbs. It's the guys that come and help with the plumbing.
Wow.
And I have personally asked them if they've been trained on any type of security stances, and they absolutely said no.
Do you think the
So-
Northeastern Nevada Regional Hospital realizes the level of liability and responsibility
They do.
that they're incurring
I've asked them.
by having
Yes,
those
I've
people
asked
do
them.
that?
That's incredible. So give me an idea of some other issues that you guys are facing and that are important to you during these negotiations.
Well, safe staffing, and that includes ancillary. It's just as safe to have a respiratory tech available to help me resuscitate a newborn, and rather than her or he being, held up somewhere else in a department, they need backup. So we're trying to get safe staffing around the facility to where it meets the standards of safe health care for our patients. Also, we are trying to come together with a committee that we can meet with the management team here. We can meet with them equally and discuss the staffing issues or departmental issues that need to be handled coming from the nurses. That way we feel like it's been handled on a equal, table, and we can work together as a group to provide safe care to this community.
Well, and that's a concept I think a lot of people who don't enjoy the benefit of collective bargaining don't understand. This the labor management committee.
Yes.
And when you work in some places, your suggestions may amount to so much as a suggestion box. What ideas do you have? Put a slip of paper in this box, and that's about all you get. And for people who haven't experienced this, a labor management committee is where you get to actually sit down, on a level playing field and discuss issues and resolve them before they become really big problems. And in a lot of cases, these suggestions can be cost saving, or they could be for safety, or just they could be good for morale, right?
Right. Retention is a big thing here in Elko right now. Yes.
Ashley, have you noticed any issues regarding to nurses being overworked and experiencing burnout because of the lack of staffing? And what about the support staff as well? Do you think that it's taking its toll on the staff?
Physically and mentally, absolutely. All around I'm going to call it the house because that's what I call it, all around the facility. You walk around, 7 years ago I started here and it was owned by a different corporation, but it's a different place. People are pale. The ER nurses alone here are living on saltine crackers, and they go 12 hours without using the bathroom, without break or lunch.
Wow.
And you ask me if that's a burnout. Yeah, that's a recipe for a burnout. As far as ancillary staff, absolutely. They work very hard. They have an endless list of things to do, and then the list keeps getting bigger and bigger. And is there a thank you? Is there an attaboy? No. So that leads to burnout. We all need a thank you. We all need a pat on the back. We all need a, proud of you. That's a healthy work environment, and it is not happening here.
Wow. Well, Ashley, I want to thank you for joining us today, and also for all the work that you do up there in Elko.
Thank you, Ashley.
I
Thank
just want
you for having me.
I want to mention that later on today at 3:00 at the Red Lion in Elko, there will be a general meeting for all NNRH workers, and to ask questions and to find out where we stand in negotiations and to get the details on the plan that they have to get a good contract. And again, that's this afternoon at 3 p.m. at the Red Lion in Elko. Ashley, are you going to be there?
Yes, I will.
All right, very good. You can ask Ashley the questions that you have yourself. Again, Ashley, thank you very much, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Ashley. Good
Thank
luck.
you for having me, guys. Bye-bye.
Following is a public service announcement from the We Are Nevada Talk Radio Show. Have you ever had your home or your car burglarized? You'll be surprised to know that some of the most common reasons for being burglarized include forgetting to lock the doors and forgetting to lock the windows. Let's be safety smart, Nevada. The next time you leave the house or park your car, stop and think, did I remember to lock my doors and windows? Then take a moment to check. Help Nevada law enforcement help you by being safety smart. This is a public service announcement from the new We Are Nevada KLAV 1230 AM Talk Radio in Las Vegas.
Coming to you live every Friday morning at 9 a.m.
Coming up next week on We Are Nevada.
We talk about PERS and a new website that's out there to help you get real information on the health of the PERS system and how it works.
We'll have the latest with the education initiative that will help us finally bring adequate funding to education and stabilize the state budget.
On next week's show, we'll bring a special guest to talk about issues that are important to retirees in the community.
And we'll give you the latest information on the fight for safe staffing in our hospitals and how every Nevada needs to be concerned about health care. Safe staffing protects hospital workers, but it also protects our most vulnerable.
All that and more right here on the new We Are Nevada talk radio show. This is our voice here in Nevada for all working families. Every Friday morning at 9 a.m. on KLAV 1230 AM radio or on the internet at www.klav1230am.com.
It's a prayer for our fallen brothers and sisters. There's a blood-red circle on the cold, dark ground, and the rain is falling down. The church door's thrown open, I can hear the organ song, but the congregation's gone. My city of ruins, my city of ruins. Now the sweet bells of mercy drift through the evening trees, young men on the corner like scattered leaves. The boarded up windows, the empty streets, and my brother's down on his knees. My city of ruins, my city of ruins. Come on, rise up, 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 come on, rise up. Come on, rise up. Now there's tears on the pillow, darling, where we slept. And you took my heart when you left. Without your sweet kiss, my soul is lost, my friend. Tell me, how do I begin again? My city's in ruins, my city's in ruins. Now with these hands, with these hands, with these hands, with these hands, I pray, Lord. With these hands, with these hands, I pray for the strength, Lord. With these hands, with these hands, I pray for the faith, Lord. With these hands, with these hands, we pray for your love, Lord. For the lost, Lord. With these hands, with these hands, pray for this world, Lord. With these hands, with these hands, pray for the strength, Lord. With these hands, with these hands, pray for the strength, Lord. With these hands, come on, with these come on, hands, come on, rise up, come on, rise up, come on. Come on, rise up. 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 Come on, rise.